Hi folks, this is going to be a short video on something I think about quite frequently and understand in trying to understand from the scriptures the return of the Lord, the second coming, the rapture, the day of the Lord, what Christians are looking forward to, the blessed hope, and the various interpretations of it, pre-tribulational understanding, a post, being the two main thoughts associated with it. I want to look at the concept of the day of the Lord and why I believe it cannot be reconciled with pre-tribulational thinking. And we're just going to look at something briefly, and then you can, of course, make up your own mind about it. Pre-tribulationists contend that the day of the Lord, or that the church rather, will be raptured before the beginning of the Great Tribulation that Jesus spoke of in Matthew 24, Luke 21, Mark 13. They also contend that the day of the Lord is a period of time, generally 7 years, and it's to include the Great Tribulation as well. And they will say that the beginning of the day of the Lord sparks the Great Tribulation, the beginning of the Great Tribulation. And the church apparently won't be here, will be raptured before the day of the Lord even begins. The problem with thinking this kind of thing is that the Bible tells us that the day of the Lord happens after certain cosmic events, found in Joel 2:31 and Acts 2:20. I want to read from Acts 2, beginning verse 16. Peter is quoting from Joel, and he says this. He says, "In the last days it shall be that God declares, I will pour out my spirit on all flesh. Your sons and daughters will prophesy. Young men see dreams, old men dream visions. Dream dreams, and young men see visions. On my male servants and female servants I'll pour out my spirit, and they shall prophesy. And I'll show wonders in the heavens above, signs on the earth below, blood and fire and vapor of smoke. The sun," and this is what we want to focus on, Acts 2:20, "the sun shall be turned to darkness and the moon to blood before the day of the Lord comes, the great and magnificent day. And it shall come to pass that everyone who calls upon the name of the Lord shall be saved." Now here the sun's not giving its light and the moon being turned to blood happens before the day of the Lord in both Joel and Acts. In fact, Acts quoting Joel here. When you harmonize scripture and see that Jesus in Matthew 24 and Luke 21, Mark 13 also spoke of these same events with the inclusion of stars falling from heaven, he said so that this would happen after the Great Tribulation, or after the tribulation of those days. You will see these cosmic events which take place before the coming of the Son of Man, or before the day of the Lord comes. So it's now easier to see how the day of the Lord, just from this passage of Scripture and our harmonizing of Scripture, how the day of the Lord is a broad term that includes the coming of Christ, the gathering of believers, the judgment of unbelievers, and our understanding of how the marriage supper of the Lamb is part of this. It's worth mentioning that it also makes it extremely difficult to discount Matthew 24 as being prophetically applicable to the church. So if someone wants to maintain pre-tribulationism, unfortunately they're going to struggle to interpret the day of the Lord as a period of time in which believers are not going to be present, particularly when reading 1st and 2nd Thessalonians. The day of the Lord takes place after cosmic events. We see this clearly. And Christ spoke of these same cosmic events. So it seems to me that if we get our understanding of the day of the Lord, the day of God, day of Christ, and that day right, and I believe they're all synonymous events that speak of the same thing or the same things happening, then it's easier to harmonize Scripture. So simply and in summary, the major point is this, is that the day of the Lord comes at the end of the Great Tribulation. And it happens after cosmic events. So one of the implications of this is that the Great Tribulation has to be before the day of the Lord. And if that's the case, the rationale of pre-tribulationism is fundamentally flawed, and you can't understand it, pre-tribulationism, from 1st and 2nd Thessalonians if your understanding of the day of the Lord is a period of time that takes place before the tribulation even begins. Okay, thanks guys. Any comments or quotes?